A very good morning. Welcome back, those that went with us into the break here on MorningAtNTV. If you are just joining us, welcome on board. We are glad to have all hands on deck. We are delving into land matters on the Kickstarter this morning and addressing the challenges that are related to land ownership in the country, as well as a review of land laws and policies in the country. I have a very interesting set for a panel that will be helping us with the insights and perspective to embolden our understanding of ongoing efforts to resolve some of the land conflicts that Ugandans are facing today. But let me first go through a preamble before we can delve into the discussion proper. Uganda has undertaken a series of ambitious legal and policy reforms with regard to property rights and resource governance since 1995, with the intention of bringing out fundamental reforms in rights, tenure management, as well as control. Across the country, land continues to be a critical factor as its most essential pillar of human existence and a driver for national development. Uganda, however, has never had a clearly defined and/or consolidated national land policy since the advent of colonialism in the 19th century. The land policy consolidates a number of scattered policies which exist on various aspects of the land question. They are mostly diverse, sectoral, and inconclusive in many aspects. Post-independence and recent attempts to settle the land question by the Land Reform Decree of 1975, the 1995 Constitution, and the Land Act of 1998 failed to deal with the fundamental issues in land tenure due to the absence of clear policy guidelines that inform legislation and offer political and socially acceptable as well as technically feasible solutions. All right, joining me on the panel this morning to discuss this very contentious issue is the Commissioner for Land Registration at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, Baker Mugaino. We're also joined by Deo Kalikumutima, a land lawyer, as well as the Chief Executive Partner at Kalikumutima and Company Advocates. We are also joined by Bashir Juma Kizito, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the Buganda Land Board. Gentlemen, welcome to MorningAtNTV.
Morning.
Good to be here.
My apologies for not allowing each of you to say your morning greetings in line with perhaps the fact that you are on my immediate left. Let me begin with the gentleman from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development to give us an overview of where we are right now when it comes to the most contentious aspects regarding land ownership in the country. And then later we shall hear from the lawyer with regard to conflict resolution, because that is a very rampant issue and forms pretty much many of the cases that are registered in the courts of law, and later from Buganda Land Board on what is no doubt something that is at the heart of the kingdom.
Good morning, viewers. Once again, my name is Baker Mugaino. Of course, to answer the question that you raised, where we are now, as regards law and policy, we are reviewing the land policy. After 10 years, we are reviewing it. We are also started the process of looking at land laws, the RTA, the Land Act. We want to bring it into consonance with electronic transactions. Related to that, you know that we have been upgrading our land information system. Like I said last time, it's the best in Africa. And in the new upgrade, we have provided for mass registration. By mass registration, I mean that we are capable of registering 25,000 titles at a go. We come through a process called systematic land adjudication.
25,000.
Yeah, systematic land adjudication and certification. We can come, we use the area land committees, we survey entire village, and are able to now to mass produce those titles in the system. Of course, we are aware of the fact that we need to bring our law in coherence with the electronic transactions to allow for the digital signature. And what this brought about in the land sector is that it has brought about the transparency. And you know that when land records are transparent and accessible, that minimizes fraud. And related to that transparency and accessibility, we have launched the public portal. last time when we were here on this program. Now we know that we have real-time updates, and those real-time updates, you can able to get a search at a clip of a finger, a button. We have managed to reduce our transaction time from 56 days for a transfer to now to 2 days with this system. And we have also put in two-factor authentication of the system. And related again to that, where we are, the ministry is starting up open days. And these open days, we are going to have one-to-one access with our clients, our stakeholders. We'll provide experts in these open days who will be able to meet our clientele, to give them specific tailor-made solutions to their problems, and also foster relationships between the Ministry of Lands and the public.
Okay. Allow me to stay with you briefly and implore you to take us through the current land ownership options available in the country, under what circumstances, under what tenure system that we do have right now.
Of course, these tenure systems are guaranteed by law. They are provided for by law, by 1995 Constitution, the Land Act. We have the Milo tenure, the freehold tenure, leasehold tenure, and then the certificates of customary ownership, and then also offer certificates of occupancy. But there are four major tenure systems that are granted by law. The Milo, it comes out of the 1900 agreement, and then the freehold is the freehold tenure is similar to Milo tenure in terms of assets and legal capabilities. The only difference is that Milo system is only in Buganda, in the entire world, and freehold exists also in non-tenure system in the entire world. Then the customary certificates, we have been granting them to those communities that prefer to own land under customary certificates. Most of them have been granted in Karamoja region and the northern parts of Uganda, and a little bit of Busoga and the western bit of Uganda. Yeah. All
right. Of course, as we go on with the discussion, we shall be delving into the finer detail of each one of them and how controversial it's come to be, or how resolutions are being undertaken. But since you speak about the fact that the Milo land system is one that is unique to Buganda, that puts you in a very, should I say, good position across the world. You run the system alone. Take us through that and also give us an overview of the land question in Buganda. Of course, Buganda is always in the news over land, Yafe, and everything around it, and all the controversies. What is the overview?
Thank you, moderator, and good morning, viewers. Certainly, Milo land is privileged to the Buganda region by virtue of our history and of course our sister kingdoms Toro and Ankole with some bits. And the tenements are quite clear, and they make it a very clear favorite for so many people. The perpetual ownership is quite significant for so many people and attractive. But as a kingdom, definitely, we are touched quite a lot by policy reviews, reforms of the law that appear to particularly target one form of tenure. And for the viewers' information, this tenure accounts for roughly about 10% of the tenure in the country. So we think we can't have policies that comprehensively address challenges of tenure security in the country when we are targeting
only 10%.
Only 10%. Admittedly, it is centrally located. There's a lot of business it controls. It controls a lot of livelihoods. But we need to see how else the issues concerning security of tenure and land management affect the people other than just tenure. We don't think tenure is such a big concern. It would be for customary held land where some customs were not in tandem with the Constitution. But that is sorted by Article 2 of the Constitution. That makes the Constitution very supreme. So having known that we have a Constitution that brings about equity, that brings about fairness, that takes back or takes away the cultures and customs that are not okay, that are barbaric, then we should address the real issues. People are concerned with several issues: corruption, the cost of the registering land is quite high, access to funds. Most of the land titling is sporadic. You must pay for it. Apart from the current initiatives by government to massively title land, especially in the east and the north. But other than that, the rest of the country, the rest of people on Mailo land must fork out a lot of money to carry out the subdivisions and the registration. So people concerned with the management agencies that relate to land, police, the judiciary, the land office, how effective are they in delivering service? How effective are they in delivering justice for those who choose to go to courts of law? Now, we think as a kingdom that those are the things that must be carefully and promptly addressed to bring a happy ending to this land management matter. We don't think that the tenure in itself is a problem. Okay.
Council, the legal framework existing right now does offer pretty much all the safeguards needed to address some of the challenges, especially given the overview that the Constitution does provide. Do you find comfort in the system as is from a legal point of view?
It's a double-edged sword, yes and no. I'll begin with a bit of history.
Okay.
But first, allow me to refer to the Constitution of Uganda, Article 26, that provides for the right to own property. And excuse my manners. Good morning, viewers. My name is Kalikumutima Deo. I'm an attorney at Kalikumutima and Company Advocates. Because of time, I had to delve right into the discussion.
Yeah, no doubt.
Now, when the 1900 Buganda Agreement was executed, we were only 2 million Ugandans. Not that I was there. Those are the statistics. We at independence, 1962, 8 million. Now, I'm not going to go into the recent census for obvious reasons. But in my humble opinion, we should be well about 50 million to 60.
The census report puts us at 46.
Yes, that's what I said in my opinion. Now, why I'm bringing this up, our total land surface area is 240,000, approximately. Now, basic average, if every Ugandan was to own land, every Ugandan would own about 1 acre. Of course, we have scenarios where people have square miles and everything. And you will realize if you look at the issue of conflict, the more people you have, the land is not increasing. It's actually getting swallowed up.
That's right.
By the swamps, by the wetlands, because of sustainability issues. There's a challenge. Now, I must commend Ministry of Lands for coming up with the land information system. To a great extent, it has helped mitigate issues of fraud. We had issues of double titling, double plotting. I'm sure the Commissioner will talk about that. Issues of impersonation. Now, this system reduces that. But the challenge is, behind every system is a human being. These systems are not being controlled by robots. No, they are being controlled by a human being. I actually envy this man. I tell him every day, I cannot sit in your office because he sits in a political office. And land is a political question, a historical question, right from the Bible. It is indeed a contentious issue. The politics of the day guide the land question. A lot of conflict today emanates from land grabbing. Who are the people behind land grabbing? We have some elements in government. I'm not here to point fingers. Of course, we also have elements in the private sector, even lawyers. So we need to have a robust system. We need to close off the gaps. It is work in progress. At a later stage, maybe I'll talk about sustainability in terms of ensuring continuity.
I know Commissioner will talk about capacity, how they are building capacity, notwithstanding the logistical challenges, because we need to ensure continuity if this is to work. Now, from a conflict resolution perspective, the Office of Commissioner plays a mediation role. I know he'll talk about that. And that has helped to a reasonable extent.
In dispute resolution. But again, the mandate
is limited. The Office of Commissioner cannot hear matters of fraud. These are referred to the courts of judicature. Today, I believe the Land Division of the High Court has over 8,000 cases registered. Now, land is a very key component in the economy. Very key component. You have 8,000 cases sitting in court. That is why we encourage practitioners to look at other options of dispute resolution like arbitration, mediation. A lot of money is held up there. Thanks to the system now, we have expediency, ease of work, we are managing fraud, but the cases are still increasing. That is the challenge. That is something to think about. But also the risk factor. With globalization, you have innovation, you have technology, hence the system. But how are we managing the risk? Maybe Commissioner will tell us how safe are our records, data protection.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Council. You have pretty much posed most of the questions that I was going to throw at the Commissioner. So no doubt, please put that together and effectively respond to Council Kalikumutima. Yes. But allow me engage Mr. Juma Kizito, Bashir Juma Kizito. The Buganda question when it comes to land is one that is a matter of the heart. There are aspects, for example, that the kingdom has often wanted to rectify, and there are sides, or rather a certain side that it wants issues to be resolved. Before I delve into the resolution of the so many cases that arise from the conflicts, of course, I want to understand, if you were to be at the forefront of formulating a national land policy, one that encompasses all aspects in order for the nation to reach a harmonious framework, what would that be from the point of view of Buganda? Because when people hear that there are contentions between government and Buganda over this and this, people want to know, what does Buganda want in terms of land?
Thank you very much. Buganda's position has always been consistent. We are not moving for a unique position. We don't want to be treated in a special status. But all we're demanding is equity. We're demanding for fairness. We're demanding for fair play. Where you have a situation of conflicting or overlapping rights on land, you have a land or registered owner, and then you have the tenants on the land. When you're coming up with policies and laws, these should look at the two parties in an equitable manner, not just choosing to play one side over the other. And Buganda Land Board, the Kingdom's land management agency, has tried to give a clear blueprint of what government will be doing. No wonder the challenges that exist on Milo land between those overlapping rights are not that many on Kabaka's land. Why? Because we are trying to offer a blueprint that government should be using, or another person interested in harmonious living should be using. We're saying that we should continue advocating for mutual existence, not putting one party over the other. We should continue providing as much awareness to all the parties. We should continue facilitating documentation, and when you come to the rates payable, then we shouldn't be going for nominal rates, because then the landowners will be complaining. But rather, if you look at the Busuru and individual law, then in that regard, it was trying to protect over-exploitation, but it was recognizing that the people using the land were getting something economical from the land. So as a result, they should be paying something to the landlord. So we're coming up with a policy. We should equally address access to financing. Buganda Land Board has made partnerships with financial institutions where the tenants on Kabaka's land can be helped to acquire finance to regularize their tenure on land. So the policy should be that comprehensive, looking at all aspects, awareness, looking at equity for the parties involved, looking at access to finance, looking at, you know, all those things in a consolidated manner. In our attempts, most of the things have been tenant driven, tenant paid. But we're saying, well, what can government do in such a procedure? One, if the land problem is going to exist, then government can look at things like using the land fund to pay off the landlords, such that the tenants, we don't have that dual problem on the land, dual ownership on the land. They can pay off the landlords. That is a good solution. But where that can't work, then what Buganda Land Board is doing is okay. It allows the recognition of the lawful occupants of the land in the same way as it is promoting leaseholds on land. Now, we've seen several players, notably from government, just choosing to promote one thing against the others. The land policy, the current land policy is offering 4 options that would harmonize the relationship of the owner and the tenant. These 2 parties can choose to buy out from each other, they can choose to lease out from each other, they can choose to share, and then obviously they can go for the ground rent. Now, all the 4 options should be available. Government should facilitate these 4 options where we still have that dual problem in place.
On which of those concerns, Commissioner, is government lending an ear?
I'm happy that my colleague has started with an appreciation of the policy, that the policy is perfect, it offers all the options, and also what I may emphasize here is that the kind of tenure that is specifically interested in was brought back by the 1995 Constitution. You know, Idi Amin had abolished Mailo under the Land Reform Decree. And what I want also to emphasize here is that our government recognizes a continuum of rights spectrum, where the laws recognize a continuum of rights spectrum of both registered land and unregistered land. So your rights are protected. So what we are discussing here, we're engaging in, is an issue of rights and protection. It's not really an issue of tenure. It's an issue of rights and protection. And our Constitution guarantees also private property rights. So just like the way I said that the policy provides for alternatives, yes, the policy provides for alternatives, and these alternatives can be exploited depending on the different circumstances to sort out the problem that we do have.
Okay.
Yes.
In the courts of law, when it comes to practitioners, this is some bit of a dilemma. I do not know how it's being approached. Very briefly, talk to us about how you are approaching it from the legal perspective, and then we can quickly go, he can respond to some of the questions that you raised.
I do share the same sentiments with my learned friends. The question is, to what extent are the rights protected? Because that's why we're in court. That's why we're in court anyway.
Ownership.
Yeah. For me, it is, if I was to rate it out of 10, maybe, and this is being very generous, maybe 5 out of 10. We have good laws.
Feel free to be conservative.
We have good laws, so what? We have good laws on paper, so what? We have good policies, so what? One of the biggest challenges that we have is implementation and execution. Interestingly, even when we go to court and get these wonderful orders, after 10 years, 20 years of litigation, you cannot enforce the order. You have to go through another stringent process that was tailored to protect the rights. That is clogged in corruption, abuse of office, and the so-called orders from above. One day I asked a certain officer, does God still land? Why are you always telling us orders from above, orders? Yes, we do have the good laws that provide for the rights,
But in my humble opinion, the rights are not being protected. That is why we have the continuous land grabbing. That is why we have over 8,000 cases in court. That is why we have a corrupt and rotten system. It is not all doom and gloom, don't get me wrong, but we must do a reality check. Is it enough to have these wonderful laws? What can we do
to improve? Because like I said, even in the private sector, we have our own what? We have our own challenges. So I do agree with my brother, Mr. Bashir,
that there are certain aspects that we need to look at, like financing. Like I said, land is a very key component of the economy. When you're talking about rights, don't forget the gender issues, women's rights. I thank God that we have over 25,000 titles being created. I hope at the end of the day we have titles created everywhere, more rights being created, but we also need to protect these rights. We need to have systems that work. We need to have offices that work. It is not good enough to have Mr. Mugaino doing his work, yet the people below him are not. It is not good enough to have Mr. Bashir doing his work, yet the people below him are not. Or you find a situation where maybe Mr. Bashir is also caught up in the impunity. Or his hands are tied. Like I said, for example, Mr. Mugaino here, he's in a political office. He must manage the politics of the day. This general is calling, this senior police officer is calling. So it is dicey. We must be more deliberate, we must be more proactive, not reactionary. Every time there's a land grabbing issue, a minister is going to run there to calm it down. Why don't we prevent it in the first place? Why should we wait for it to happen? That is where there's a challenge, and that's why these cases keep increasing. Rising. Yeah.
Please take it away.
Yes, I can take that from there.
Because it's a lot.
Yes, first of all, the commissioner is a technical officer. Is an officer.
Yeah, I was about to say, please, get yourself out of the spot of bother.
Yeah, is an office of knowledge.
Yes.
And for those of you who have visited Ministry of Lands, you have seen sometimes the office take technical positions. So it's not political. And then one thing that I need to emphasize here is that when we are talking about the land law, and we also have to put in question the fact that your ownership, of rights, your rights of ownership of land are also affected by other related laws, like NEMA, the environment laws, physical planning. The mere fact that you're a landowner doesn't necessarily mean that you use the land the way you're supposed to use it. So, of course, there's normally confusion where people may presume that because I own land in perpetuity, then I'm supposed to use it through a certain way. You talked about the so-called land grabbing, and what I want to emphasize here is the protection that is guaranteed by law, and the protection that is guaranteed by the offices that are to deal with both land and law enforcement as well. Yes, it is true. We have a lot of cases in the land division. But one fact that you cannot take away is that just like where you go to the commercial court or you go to the family court, in human nature you can never take away conflict.
You can't.
Yes, conflict is part of human nature. However, what is important is for the government to put in place institutions that manage that conflict. And in this particular aspect, of course, the cost is one of them. The Commissioner Land Registration under Section 91 of the Land Act is also has a dispute resolution mechanism, and the Ministry of Lands is also coming up with a mediation center. The ministry has trained over 60 officers in mediation to try to come up with a mediation center to help to manage these disputes. You know as well that also under our law, it allows for customary leaders to handle dispute resolution and mitigation of land held under customary ownership. So conflict is part of our society, but what is important for us to have as many
those resolution mechanisms
as possible, which I think that we are moving with the pace. We are not yet there, but I think we are moving with the pace. And then the issue of overlapping rights, I think all of us are in agreement with this, that it's historical. And it's a problem that even our colonial masters failed to manage. Remember, we had the Bataka uprising of 1955. We had that uprising of the tenants that resulted to the Busuran and Vujo law. Then there are reports of commission of inquiries, then that even which the British could not manage the situation. So it's a problem that all governments have been cropping up with. But like the way my co-president mentioned out, the land policy brought about a lot of options that I think that can solve this problem, including the willing buyer, willing seller basis, whereby a landowner can buy off a tenant or another way, plus also the land fund that has been trying to settle this problem as well. So I think with that, I think we are trying to manage it through the right direction. And then you talked about also the data protection. We have the data protection laws. Our LIS is anchored on a security system that I don't want to talk about here, but it's anchored, it's protected by the technological institutions of Uganda. We have not had any hacks into it, so it's really protected, it is secure. By the time, of course, it has been voted to be a benchmark for Africa. Then even the donor community knows what it's talking about. Did I forget anything, Mr. Kalikumutima?
Exhausted.
Exhausted, yes.
I'm glad.
Yes.
When a lawyer says
yes.
no more questions,
Yes. Now, what is important here always is that when we are gauging the efficiency of government in the online question, it's always good to look at where we were and where we are today. You understand that most of these reforms were brought about by the 1995 constitutions. And if you look at the reforms were of a wider scale. That shows where the land problem was and where we are currently today. Because if you tell me that 8 or 9 years ago we had disorganized land records, they are not accessible. The land office was only in Kampala, I think Masaka and Mukono. We did not have customary certificates of title. If you gauge where we are now from where we were in the past, I think it's good to appreciate the tremendous effort that we have put in as a government. The issue to do with the fraud, also, you have to look at it from 2 aspects. Fraud also comes out from our moral degeneration as a society. That's something we have to talk about, our moral degeneration as a society. And I normally give this example. When you go to, for example, to our LC1, even without the land registration system or the title system, unregistered land, you hear of so many cases where is a witness in one transaction, then another witness in the same transaction, and you hear all those kind of stories. So when you talk about fraud, this has to be fought together as a system, as a society. It's something that the government takes on, but it has to take on in consortium with the communities that we live in. When we talk about evictions again, of course, this has to be also talked about as a society, because the laws have put in place a lot of procedures to do with eviction. One is that it has to be by a court order. You know, and that court order has to be supervised by law enforcement, you know. So why was this put in place? That because of the realization of the fact that evictions can cause social tensions and social disharmony within society. It's more than, it causes social discomfortation. So it is important that it is done in an organized manner, whereby even the person who's going to be evicted is given time to appeal against that court decision. He is not taken into shock. Yes, it has to be done in a manner that is fraudulent.
I'm afraid people are well shocked every day across the country, and that's down to some aspects, including, as Councillor Kalikumutima said, corruption. And what you also allude to, the fact that there is moral degeneration. Gentlemen, we're going for a break, but when we return, this conversation will continue, and then maybe we'll look at how efforts to ensure conflict resolution is improved, especially with regard to alternative dispute resolution. How effective is that is a question that will go to Council Kalikumutima and Mr. Bashir Juma Kizito from the Uganda Land Board. You spoke very eloquently and passionately about finance. I would love to know exactly how the willing buyer-seller narrative plays into aspects of cultural land ownership within Buganda. People have their money, they can buy, and there are those who want to sell. However, there is a lot of unfairness within that process. Stay with us, we'll be right back. MorningAtNTV continues after the break. A very warm welcome from the break. The discussion was quite light-hearted behind the scenes. Of course, as we enter the final bend, no doubt some of those sentiments will come through. You are watching MorningAtNTV. We are at the Kickstarter segment and addressing challenges related to land ownership as well as a review of land laws and policies in the country is what we are opining about. Now, as I had promised when we were going into the break, the lawyer has some issues that he is actually worried about. The fact that the ongoing developments and the onboarding in terms of technology could render some lawyers redundant, and that could send them back to the village if the layman's words are anything to use. He'll be explaining that to us. But allow me engage the gentleman from the Buganda Land Board, the Deputy CEO, Mr. Bashir Juma Kizito. We spoke about, and very passionately by the way, the financing issue. It seems you have a particular blueprint that Buganda has put together that should be able to allow for attaining this particular objective. But the narrative I'm really concerned about is the aspect of willing buyer and willing seller. When that transaction is being conducted, yes, we know somebody has accepted to sell and another one is willing to buy. But the circumstances of the sale of land usually are controversial. Some people are coerced into it, some others are manipulated, others are misled. And it's after these transactions have been done that conflict emerges. And somebody is like, but here we are. We have an agreement and I bought the land, it's now mine. This one claims I was unfairly taken advantage of because I am illiterate. I signed documents that I didn't have no idea about, or they were totally misrepresented. How might that affect your goal of ensuring that people can actually go about transacting, selling and buying?
Thank you very much, moderator. The option is part of what the National Land Policy provides as a solution for mutual existence between the landowners and the tenants on the land. But that is not the first instance where value or consideration is an issue. How should it be sorted? We think that government shouldn't just do one thing, providing a solution, but rather it can go a step further and provide regulations of how this transaction should happen. You've raised very pertinent issues of how this transaction usually ends up into a conflict, and which can be sorted easily by providing a clear roadmap of how it should be. Right from establishing the value of the land, what is adequate, what is fair, that can be guided by government. Then the negotiations, that still can be guided by an elaborate system, a set of regulations, without necessarily going into the economy or trying to manage the market forces. But we're talking about a procedure that will allow the free flow of market forces such that the buyer, willing seller can ably work for these two players on my land. But even rising away from security of tenure being the absolute ownership of these rights, we can say that even when the two coexist, still financing is needed to make people feel safe. When we talk about security of tenure, it's not just having absolute rights, but rather, what does the common man think about security of tenure? They should feel safe that when they're on the land, they are not going to be under any threat. That is one. They should feel that they are recognized by the neighborhood and the whole environment, that their existence is known and protected by the neighborhood and the laws in the place. Then three, that they can use their status to enjoy from their rates. Now, and this is what we're doing as Buganda Land Board. The tenants on cultural land don't have to own milo land titles. On the contrary, they can exist as tenants who can get leaseholds, or who even can stay as lawful occupants on the land. But they can access finance so they can improve their livelihood. If they want to get leaseholds, we are aware of the socio-economic realities when they're saying having a land title is quite expensive. So let's provide for a situation where somebody can pay in the bank for over 4 or 5 years, and in return they can get a land title. But even in the process, when they don't have the land title yet, the bank recognizes them as people who are holding land titles because of the engagement that has happened between the bank and the Buganda Land Board. And we're saying government should preach more of that, how they can facilitate people into this statute of tenure discussion.
Okay.
But back to the theme of the day, I totally agree that there is need for review of land laws and policies in the country. Some of these laws are very colonial. You're looking for Generation Z questions and challenges to be sorted by solutions coming from the colonial
that
times.
are still buried in 1940.
That is not okay. You're having RT, the Registration of Titles Act, that came into place in 1924. What solutions is it providing to date? We are looking at the Surveyors Act that came into place in 1939, and we are merging it with new technology. Most of the things we are doing are not even enabled by law. So we're saying it shouldn't take quite a lot to have some of these amendments. Okay. It is high time we amend the Registration of Titles Act. It is high time we review and amend the Surveyors Act. It is high time to amend the Surveyors Registration Act. These are very close laws to the transactions in land today, and it is a shame that we are still relying on them, and they were made for those colonial times.
All right, we have the commissioner here. What I hear in all that is that government isn't up to speed when it comes to the reform agenda. I think you're going to have to put the car that has 100 speed limit and get a new one that has 250, because when you are in the one that goes to 100 and you hit the gas to the bottom, you think you've done everything, yet actually you need a better car so that the pace can increase. You'll be responding to that very shortly, but there's something that he talked about, and it affects the banking sector, especially when it comes to the access to financing and to allow for people to transact that business. This is down to due diligence, the ability to conduct and get all the information you need in order to make decisions, including accessing finance and being able to allow people to do anything constructive in terms of developing that land in order to improve their own livelihoods. But does that fall within the sustainability question? Is it something that works well?
Now,
due diligence is a very necessary aspect of life. I actually tell people, before you even marry, you must do due diligence. Church, the church you're going to go to, do the necessary due diligence. So, from a finance perspective, it is very necessary. From a land ownership perspective, it is very necessary. And the parameters are broad. It should actually go beyond just doing an ordinary search. The search that my friend Mr. Mugaino issues has a disclaimer at the bottom. I do not guarantee the authenticity of the information contained herein. So is
that true?
It is true. And this is not personal. He knows it is true. There's a reason why, there is actually a good reason why they put it there. So you
maybe
must...
it's plausible deniability issue.
I'm sure he can explain.
Okay.
So now you do have to carry out elaborate due diligence. Yes, carry out the search. You must go to the ground, inspect the property, interact with the local authorities, open the boundaries, ascertain the acreage.
Speak to the local drunkard.
The local drunkard. That is parameter number 4. Most important. Now, for those of you who have issues with drunkards, you will be fine. So, due diligence is very necessary. And the finance sector has suffered greatly because it is not exhausting it. Now, unfortunately for the learned commissioner here, he's at the tail end. Every blame to him, even the part that is supposed to be done by us, by the banks. Say, no, the commissioner did. You must do your part. And the system that we are running on today makes it a lot easier because it has an interface. It is a platform. It is connected to Uganda Registration Services Bureau. It is connected to NIRA. It is connected to URA. Their work is actually a lot easier now. Before a registrar endorses anything, they will check, is this company registered in Uganda? Where is the controlling interest? Ugandan and non-Ugandan. Identity, is this Kalikumutima Deo or it is impersonation? The due diligence is made a lot easier, and like I said, fraud mitigation is also made easier. But I must reemphasize, I have that concern that behind every system is a human being who controls it. But credit must be given where it is due. The system is effective, it is efficient, it makes work easier, and we must evolve with the times. Like my brother Mr. Bashir said, today we're talking about technology. This is not 1924 when these laws came into place, so it is necessary to what? To decolonize. Credit is given to the government, surely. Can you do better? Of course, you must do better.
You must do better. And that's the question that comes to you. You've done so much, including the latest reforms and the ability for people to do their own searches and go on with making the final decisions. I'll be returning to you shortly on what is no doubt a threat to the legal profession. I think the monies and the avenues are dwindling. I don't know whether you're considering. But basically the commissioner take it on.
Yes, thank you so much, Presenter. First of all, I want to just clarify on the issues that was raised to the fact that we are slow in amending these laws. In my first bit of the presentation, I talked about the progress that we are doing in the amendment of the RTA. And even these electronic transactions that we are doing today has been brought by ourselves. So internally, a lot is ongoing on. Externally, I would agree if my colleagues don't know what's going on internally. But maybe I can just inform you that we have finished the RIA, the Regulatory Impact Assessment for the amendment of these laws. That's the cost-benefit analysis. And as you agree with me that land reform is also a slow process because it involves a lot of studies and research related to that. And then also an issue which was talked about was issue to do with the due diligence, the disclaimer. I've had a presentation with the banks on how this due diligence is done. Of course, doing a search is one thing, and then also physically visiting the land is another thing. Like one famous judge said that land is not a bunch of vegetables. So meaning that after you have done your search, you're supposed to visit the site, do a boundary opening, get a cadastral search as well to make sure that the cadastre is as intact as the title. And then, of course, the entire land law is modeled around possession. So it's useless for me to have a title, which I'm selling to you when I'm not in possession. Yeah, so that's something the banks have to look at. However, allow me also talk about the upcoming open days that the minister is going to have.
Yeah, let's do that very quickly.
Yes, we will have an open day in Bukalas on 29th October, cases 31st, and then in pages on the 4th November. And what do we expect on these open days? We are going to have information sharing between us and our clients. We shall have an information booth that talks about the services that we do. And then we shall have one-on-one consultations with our technicians and technical officers from the ministry. And then we shall demonstrate to the public our unique capabilities.
Commissioner, thank you very much. I'm afraid time is not my best ally. I'm going to have to end this discussion and pray that the lawyers, as learned as you are, you'll find your way around the system so that you can stay with the jobs and the money keeps flowing in. Many thanks, gentlemen. Bashir Kizito from the Buganda Land Board, Mr. Baker Mugaino, the Commissioner Land Registration at the Ministry of Lands, Labour and Housing, and of course, Council Deo Kalikumutima. Your submissions and insights have emboldened our understanding of these matters, and I hope that whoever does make any decision right now with regard to land, you know how to go about it. The conflict resolution mechanisms are in place. We do hope that everything can be streamlined and expedited to ensure that the layman, the real guy at the bottom of the pyramid, also gets justice. Let me now link to my colleague, Stephen Mbide, who is standing by. A very good morning, Stephen.